And also we've got comments on the backyard, on the outdoor space also to be maximized at the towards the back of the building, and also maximizing the buffer between our site and the surrounding residents, and take advantage or utilizing the existing tree buffer that we currently have. We've also heard comments about eliminating the community space that we've had shown on the other concept in the front of the building. So this is something that you'll see as we're presenting our concept. And also comments on mitigating the noise impact from the emergency generator located at the rear of the building. So this is as far as the outdoor spaces. As far as parking and traffic, there was comments about parking reduction and maximizing the green space, and also concern about the traffic on Beacon Hill Road. And there was some comments and requests to have bike lanes, speed bumps, and safe sidewalks. As far as the comments in relation to the building design, there was comments about distinguishing between the uses by using a different type of material on the exterior, different type of colors, and also comments about the massing of the building. Sustainability and site design, we also got comments on those. So there was request to use green roofs, solar panels, and rain gardens, and these will be also incorporated into our design, since the building is designed to receive a net zero building and a LEED Gold certification. And also we had comments on how would our development impact the drainage pattern. So we will be also looking into incorporating stormwater management treatment for the project, and also underground the utilities. And as Christine mentioned, BKV and MTFA will be presenting a consensus, a consolidated concept that basically address these comments and also mitigate a lot of the concerns that we've heard from the community. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark Manetti from BKV and Michael Foster from MTFA to go over the concepts that we will be proposing today. And thank you all.
Claudia, real quick before they get started, I just want to mention that I did start the recording for tonight's presentation, so members that are not here this evening can see it. And I'm also seeing that we have Barbara Faison from the committee has joined us. Thank you, Barbara.
It's Brenda Faison.
Sorry, Brenda. Thank you. I'm reading it and I'm saying Barbara instead of Brenda as I'm reading it. It's been
okay. So I guess I'll get going with the presentation. Thank you again for taking your evening to go through this with us. We do appreciate it. As Claudia said, we got a lot of really good feedback from our community meeting. Along with the community meeting, we've also had some meetings with VDOT and with Fairfax County Department of Transportation Planning. So we've been getting some really good feedback. And as is the process when we're in this phase of the design, we developed three different concepts for review and comment, and then we developed a consolidated concept based on the input that we received. And so I'll go through and provide an overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael to specifically talk about some of the areas related to the shelter and some of those functions and some of the overall planning changes that we've incorporated. So we'll start with what really hasn't changed. The location of the different programs isn't changed. The fire station still is located on the far side, or the easternmost side of the property side along Beacon Hill Road. The affordable housing still resides between the shelter and the fire station. Of course, the shelter is on the westernmost edge of Beacon Hill Road, and so that was, I think, always one of the main goals of the planning, and it was iterated in all three different concepts and still remains. We heard some really good feedback that there was some preference towards what we called the urban edge concept, and it was primarily related to the amount of green space along Beacon Hill Road and what was really needed by the community. And so there was definitely a preference to reduce the amount of amenity space in front of the building, and to provide greater amenity space for the housing component in the rear. Now, ironically, related to the hybrid or the urban edge concept, that was the only concept that had the shelter function entering off of Beacon Hills Road. The other two concepts had it entering, where it's currently shown off of a plaza that accesses Beacon Hill Road. So again, part of the consolidated concept is to take the best ideas of all three concepts and put them all together and come up with something that meets as many of the goals and input and feedback that we receive. And we think that this is an exceptional direction in terms of pushing the building slightly forward so that it's a stronger edge along Beacon Hill Road, in keeping with the goals of density for the redevelopment of the Route 1 corridor. But then it also allows the shelter entrance to occur with visible access from Beacon Hill Road, and will help orient customers, clients to the shelter entrance. And it also allows the building to provide a natural separation between the shelter, the supportive housing, the affordable housing, and the fire station. So the decision, the layout of the overall concept, we think is really positive. Some of the feedback that we received from the community related to the entrance location that we had shown previously, because as you recall, all three concepts showed an entry location to serve the shelter and the affordable housing, basically right where the entry plaza is currently shown in this concept. And so the feedback that we received from the community actually was very consistent with the feedback that we received also from VDOT and Fairfax County Department of Transportation. They wanted us to relocate the entrance that serves the shelter and the affordable housing, which we did. So that entrance is now located further into the site, and this is in keeping with their access management requirements. We still will need a waiver because of the location of the existing entrance to Walgreens, which is currently deficient, but because it's an existing condition, we will still need a waiver for that. But we're going to be entering the site off of Beacon Hill Road, and we'll basically be driving under the building. And then we will follow the grade to the rear of the building, where we'll have surface parking, and then we've increased the amount of tuck under parking so that you'll be driving under and into the parking garage. And then that's allowed us to kind of elevate, create kind of a podium so that the affordable housing amenity in the rear is now accessed off the main level, whereas before it was a level down. So that's a real positive that we think in terms of the overall quality of the affordable housing development and how that's going to work, to have the amenity at the same level. And there was a preference and also expressed related to integrating vegetated roof systems and those types of elements, which we've done as you can see the elevated deck for the affordable housing amenity in the rear. Now, Michael's going to talk a little bit about what we did for the entry plaza and the amenity in the shelter entrance and how that's going to work with respect to that program.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank all of you that showed up at the community meeting to offer many good comments and ask many tough questions. And we documented those thoroughly and reviewed them and tested them against all the options to really discover one that addressed most, if not every single comment. In addition to that, as Mark had mentioned, VDOT really pushed for safety to move the access drive further west to the west side of the parking, where he's pointing right now on your screen. And the good news is the fire department picked the most efficient, compact site plan that allowed a little extra buffer in the landscape to the side and the back. And by putting the, some of the bunk rooms on the upper floor, it made a more graceful way for that part of the site to work, which allowed a little bit extra room to allow us to put an entry plaza for the shelter on the far left upper right corner. And by taking the road out of that, it gave a welcome plaza so that the customers for that space would arrive right off of Route 1 and be off the street and sidewalk, and then come into a entry plaza that is set back on the long edge of the shelter where it is most efficiently done and as a discrete entrance. And then we use the space on that left side for a recreation area and a private courtyard that's behind the building and separated by the required mechanical space so that there is a discrete secure area that is separated from the affordable housing and the fire station and the other part of the neighborhood on Beacon Hill Road. That allowed us to put the entrance to the supportive housing tucked up front, and the way that laid out with elevators and parking to stack, it allowed that urban edge idea that people liked to be accomplished with a side yard instead of a road. And then to break up the scale of the facade, you'll notice that the shelter projects a little bit forward, so we have more room in the back, and that gives a discrete identity that steps back, a little bit more urban as it is closer to Route 1, and it steps back for the affordable housing and step back a little bit more for the large apron for the fire trucks to have safe, easy access in and out of the fire station. So that gives us a large backyard for the affordable housing for, barbecue grills and fire pits and kids recreation, things that are probably better suited for the backyard, but still have a very distinguished urban scale front yard that is commensurate in scale with some of the front yards of the houses across the street, as you can see by scale across the street. And that also allowed us to do the tuck under parking that allowed us to increase the depth of the landscape buffer to our neighbors behind, so that there's a nice density of trees that will break up the distance and scale of any impact of any of these buildings. So I think for the site plan, while it's still in a design in process, it has really started to address all the good comments and all the tough questions that we heard. Everything from more green roof coverage to the opportunity of photovoltaics on the roof to less surface parking and more green space. It's starting to have a very nice level of maturity as it fits into this community. So thank you.
So this next image is showing the relationship of the tuck under parking. So you can see we're coming down the ramp, and that ramp can be 5 to about 6.5%, and we'll work those grades out as we design. But then you're coming down to the rear, and then you have 3 points of entry into the parking garage. So the parking garage layout gets much more straightforward, and what we're developing now is a consolidated elevator lobby that's going to serve all the functions. And we think that that's really going to help in terms of the overall functionality of that parking area. And now that the programs are And the concept is a little bit more in focus. We've really looked at how we can kind of bring these items together. The elevators serving this building are best served if they're in a core, and we're able to accommodate that with this current design. So right now we're showing 35 spaces that are surface parking in the rear. I think we did get a comment that there's a preference to have 40 surface spaces, and that can be accommodated for sure. And then the 78 spaces inside the tuck under parking area. And then, we'll continue to refine that as we go and develop the stair cores vertically, and we'll probably lose a few spaces. That's normal, but we have enough room in here to make sure that we have adequate parking. So in one thing that related to the parking, we've been kind of receiving some countering imperatives, and probably would be good to have some direction that there's a desire on one hand to reduce the amount of parking, but then there's also a concern for spillover offsite parking concerns. And so we want to make sure that we get the right balance of providing adequate amount of parking to serve the functions, but not more than what is adequate. And we surely don't want to be in a scenario where people are parking on the street. So those are some concerns that have been addressed, and we'll still develop that as we move forward. And we've updated the renderings. We had been showing some renderings from kind of the bird level view, but now we've kind of dropped it down to the street level so that you can get a better feel from what the building will look like at street level. So what you're seeing here is the entry plaza into the shelter, and then you're also seeing the supportive housing entrance as well, and kind of the rhythm of the building as it moves down Beacon Hill. A lot of push and play with the planes to give it some variation, but also integration at the base of a little bit more resilient material. So you're seeing brick at the base, and then as it gets higher, lighter rain screen materials. So we're thinking that we would like to have some unity with respect to the overall composition, and that might be best handled with this masonry and rhythm that you're seeing expressed. But then also to respond to wanting some variety within the different uses, you can see the 3-story mass is very clearly defined, and that's all masonry, and that's the county shelter function, and then you can see the housing function kind of rising above that. So we think that it's a pretty strong differentiation within materials that also aligns with the different uses. And the fire station, because we are dropping down the hill and we are losing a little bit of mass and scale because the fire station's not as massive as the rest of the building. So you will just get that as you're coming down the street, you'll begin to see the fire station. And that's one of the reasons, as Michael mentioned, the stepping of the facades will help open up the view to the fire station as you're moving down. And then this is looking the other way. So here the fire station is very prominent. I think it has a level of distinction so that it stands out as a community facility, yet also, again, trying to borrow some of the materials such as the brick palette and bring it across so that it doesn't look so distinct that it's looking like 3 distinct buildings. It blends as well as it can as part of an overall government facility campus. And so I think that's important that we kind of bridge that gap between wanting the functions to be discernible, yet also wanting it to look as if it is a unified composition. And so I think that's a balance that we'll continue to struggle with. Some of the feedback that we've received, internal thoughts, is perhaps to allow some additional windows for the housing units at the end, so we don't have that heavy blank wall. But then one of the beautiful things that was done over at Woodlawn was the integration of art, and they did that with a mural on one of the walls at Woodlawn Fire Station. I think it was very successful, and that might be something that we look at doing here as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, to integrate something like that. And these are the bird's eye views that you'd seen before, but you can see how the plaza for the shelter entrance would be oriented. And, we're still, the landscape design and plaza design is something that we're going to develop. So what you're seeing is an initial intent, and we'll be integrating additional landscaping features and seated areas and probably some security fencing. So, it'll have a little bit more sense of place. Right now, it's perhaps a little bit too open. But I think that as we move forward, and we receive additional, feedback both from the customer as well as from the community, I think that space is going to continue to be refined. One thing that we didn't mention was we will need to use that plaza space probably for a fire lane access for emergencies in order to get around that side of the building. So it'll have to serve that purpose as well. And then this is again that bird's eye view looking back up the other way. So you can see kind of how the campus lays out from that perspective. You can see the ramp going down and how that's going to nestle in there. And that actually does provide a really strong separation now between the fire station use and the other uses as well. So you get a very strong boundary there. I think the fire station is going to function very effectively and have a level of separation that I think the fire station and the fire folks are really hoping to have with this facility.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Michael. And on this slide, we're showing the project timeline. So we're currently in the concept phase, which we're hoping by the end of this month, after we have our community meeting, we'll hopefully have some good feedback to be able to move into schematic design. And as Christine mentioned, our goal, it's our community meeting. Next one is scheduled to be I think is on the 27th, 2 Thursdays from today. And this will be an in-person meeting. The invites will be sent out the next few days, early next week, I guess, because the weekend is coming. And as far as our next steps for the project, so we have the larger community meeting on July 27th. And again, as I mentioned, concept design completion in July, and schematic design will take from August to October. And with that, we conclude our presentation for today, and I'll turn it back to Christine. Like to get any questions.
There were a few questions in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, we'll get those in just a second. I wanted to mention the community meeting is currently scheduled July 27th from 7 to 9, and we've reserved the cafeteria at Bucknell Elementary School. I also wanted to let the team know that the Penn Daw website has also been updated as of July 1st. So if you go onto fairfaxcounty.gov, you can search do Penn Daw. That'll take you directly to the project website, and information there's been updated. The meeting information has been updated. The video from the last meeting is on there. And as well, one of the features that we added as a result of the community meeting is you can go to the bottom of the screen there and you can sign up for Penn Daw updates. So anytime there's a meeting or the website gets updated or we have community information to send out, you will get an email, as well as the regular emails that we send out, in Supervisor Stork's newsletter, et cetera. But this would be specifically for Penn Daw. We collected about 72 emails at that meeting. All of those emails will be added. And then I would also, be asking Claudia to make sure that everybody that is part of the steering committee is also added to that as well. So just want to be sure that everybody is aware of that. All right, so I'm going to start with the committee members. if there's anybody that has some questions about what has been presented, and I think it might be helpful. Claudia, can you put up one of the renderings so people can take a look at it while they're asking questions?
Of course. Mhm.
Thank you.
No problem.
So
Is that a
I'll-
good one?
yeah, we can start with that. I think that's helpful. So if you're a committee member and you have a question, if you could please raise your hand in the chat, and then raise your hand and we'll go ahead and get started with those. So while folks are doing that, I will start with the first question that Catherine had in the chat. Why do the designers keep using industrial design when this is a traditional community?
If I may start with that, please understand this is a site concept study, and we have not even been authorized to get into schematic design. And I don't think there's a commitment to industrial design as the character, but we tried to put a little bit of color and texture for scale and urban design massing. And we are very excited about how this will refine and nestle well into the community. So I don't think this needs to be thought of as a schematic design presentation when it's really a site concept presentation.
Michael, you've said two different things. It will fit in nicely into the community. Well, it doesn't. The community at large is very unhappy with the industrial designs that continue to flow by every developer that is building apartments and condos, including the housing people that just did North Hill along Richmond Highway. So when you say that, you could have just as easily done this in a very nice traditional design, because this will carry through no matter what you believe. This will continue to be what people see and what people think this is going to look like and what it'll ultimately end up looking like. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. And we now must distinguish between the architecture design and the program requirement, because if the problem is the use and the need for a fire station, housing and shelter, that's a different question. I was trying to focus on the urban planning and design character, which I do believe will mature through schematic design, but I do not think the uses will, because that's not really our control. And so
I was not
they're
speaking about
different
uses.
questions.
I was speaking about architectural design, exterior design. I understand the uses and we're living with it. Not happy, but we're living with it. This is about the exterior of the buildings.
We look forward to getting to that in schematic design. Thank you.
Okay, I see a hand up. Brenda.
Yes, I can see on this design very clearly what the fire station is going to look like, but it's kind of hard to see what the housing, supportive housing, and the homeless shelter is going to look like. It's kind of in the distance. I can see that. Do you have any renderings that show up close what either one of those are going to look like?
Yes,
Claudia, are you
Yep.
able to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Claudia.
Okay. All right. And this is the front of the housing, of the supportive housing, or is this this is the shelter front?
So
Yes,
this is the shelter front in here, and this is Beacon Hill Road, and this is the front
Okay.
of the affordable housing entry will be from here, and supportive housing entry will be from here. If you can see my cursor, and this
I
is
see.
Beacon Hill Road. Yeah. So Walgreen will be on this side beyond this, what we're showing on the picture.
Okay.
And we have the
Thank-
bird eyes view also that shows that. If you'd like, I can go to that. If
Yeah,
that
if
would
you
help.
could pull that up, that would
Sure,
be great.
of course, of course. Here you go. So this is Beacon Hill Road, and this is where we have Richmond Highway. This is the shelter, that's the entry, and this is supportive housing entry and affordable housing entry.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have any comments or questions, Brenda?
Other than the fact I do agree with the previous speaker that it does look very industrial. Yeah.
Okay. Ray, you've got your hand up?
Yes, I have about 6 questions. I'll get through them. You mentioned that we need a waiver for the Walgreens entrance. Could you explain what that means?
So if you go back to the site concept, the Walgreens entrance location doesn't meet VDOT standards because it's too close to Route 1. So
Okay.
that's already deficient, but it's there. It gets grandfathered in. So accordingly, VDOT requires 470 feet between that entrance and our full functioning entrance that we're showing. We won't have 470 feet between those two.
Okay.
And so we will need an access management waiver for that full functioning entrance.
Okay. I see a retaining wall in the back of the fire station parking. How high is that? And is there a retaining wall for the other parking too under the residential, behind the residential?
So the retaining wall at the corner by the dumpster for the fire station at its most extreme is about 12 feet above the existing grade. That's the low point of the site. And the fire station has specific requirements for maintaining about a 4% maximum slope for circulating around their facility. So as a result, we do get a bit high there. But 12 feet is the maximum at that point of that retaining wall, and then it goes down to about 6 to 7 feet as it goes to the on-site surface parking. We probably will be able to grade out the surface parking so there won't be any retaining wall requirement there. We think we can probably work those grades out in the buffer, and with just typical slopes that we can achieve to get down to the back of the site. There obviously, the elevated tuck under parking. We've elevated the terrace above that. It's not a retaining wall, but it's going to have the look of a. Well, there'll basically be a wall there with openings to the tuck under parking.
So the parking by the fire station, top of the retaining wall will have some kind of a fencing on top of that.
Yeah.
So that, I would guess, would be visible to the residents that are on the adjacent street behind this site, correct?
Yeah. Yes, it would be.
And the parking for the residential portion will be, we're trying to get that on grade. So there's a chance that people from the residents could wander over and kind of hang out behind the retaining wall of the fire station and not be seen by anybody, correct?
Well, we would typically have fencing along the property at some area, but the fencing is typically on the inside of the buffer on the side that's the county property. We don't typically put fencing on the other side. So really that portion of the property then becomes open really to the adjacent parcels, but really there's not going to be any way to get from the current property across it, because there'll be a fence along the perimeter. They'll have a retaining wall and a fence, and then you'll have a fence along the surface parking. So it really becomes more part of, a continuous part of the parcels, the adjacent parcels, that they'll have access to it. Really, the site functions won't have access to it. Does that make
sense? So the people that are in the housing will not be able to meander over to the grassy area underneath the retaining wall? Because there'll be a fence there to.
Right, yeah, there's a fence there, right?
Okay.
Yep.
And there's an entry plaza for the shelter, but that's not where the entry is. So what is that entry plaza for and how is it used?
Well, it's part of the procession. So you're leaving the Beacon Hill right away, and then you're entering into these plaza areas, and you can see that blue area is where the shelter entrance is. So you'll have basically it's a procession into the entrance. You'll have, and that's intentional. And I think Michael can speak to this more eloquently in terms of the needs of people who are going to use the facility.
We don't have any processions into the shelter housing, into the supportive housing or the affordable housing. So my question would be, what is this one for?
Well, it's really about organizing the arrival, because most people that arrive in the affordable housing and the supportive housing already live there. So they have a front door, they're coming in, and they can get in the elevator and go to their apartment or their room. The shelter helps people experiencing homelessness to have an alternative to freezing on the street, and that it's important upon arrival to be oriented and welcomed, but without being on the street in the community. And then you have places that will allow that entry plaza and an entry courtyard. And then we would organize the other two as probably more fenced in for recreation or outdoor living in a way that is discreet and separated from the affordable housing and the community in the street. So these are opportunities to improve the design experience, as well as the discretion and safety for everybody involved.
I like the fact that the shelter entrance is on the side closest to Richmond Highway. That is, and it's not in the front of the building. However, I do worry that if somebody does not find themselves familiar with this, they'll be coming down Beacon Hill Road and probably try to enter the shelter through the supportive housing entrance, since that is the one that's most visible. So I think your entry plaza and the shelter entrance really need to have a lot of attention given to it, so people don't make that mistake as easily.
We agree, and there'll be both signage and other design clues, as well as the general offices and administration will be on that front left corner to monitor and help orient anybody that may not be in the right place. So that these are important aspects of the design orientation. So thank you.
The parking area, you said there was a consolidated elevator lobby to serve all functions. Can you define all functions? Is that where the shelter and supportive housing will also come up from the parking garage?
Well,
yes,
we would.
As you can see from the plan, the affordable housing is immediately adjacent, and it gives us the opportunity to do a single elevator bank with a key card entrance, that the elevator only works for your, the whatever access you have. And it allows one elevator to come up on the left edge of affordable housing. The supportive housing would be adjacent, but on their side of the line. And the shelter would be on the other side of that arrives in the shelter. So that way the core stack fits neatly in the full arrangement, because at that corner, it's the only corner that all three programs are stacked, because the first two floors are the shelter. Immediately above that, on the third floor, is the supportive housing. And then the affordable housing is L-shaped and bends 90 degrees at that location above that. So it conveniently serves everybody, but not all elevators have access to all floors. They're separated.
Okay, so the core serves everybody, but the elevators, individual elevators do not. I was worried that
No.
somebody could get into an elevator that lives in the affordable housing, go up to like the fourth floor and then walk into the supportive housing and vice
Thank
versa.
you for the clarification. That will not be possible. They're separate elevators.
All right. Maybe Christine can answer this question. Early on, we said one of the goals for the fire station was to reduce the amount of parking, so we're not providing parking for two shifts at the same time when there's only an overlap of about a half hour when one shift is leaving and the other is coming. Do you know what happened to that option or that concept?
I do not, but I know that we have folks on the call that could answer that. I know the designers know that. Lori Stone is also on from Fire, so I don't know if Lori might be better to take that.
Sure, I can take that. No, our program is definitely to require enough parking for shift change, which is 2 times the minimum shift.
Oh, Lori, too, would you mind just introducing yourself so people know?
Sure.
Yep, thank
Sure.
you.
I'm Lori Stone, and I'm in charge of planning with Fire and Rescue Department.
So you didn't want to do that at all because it's easier to do it this way? Alter the shift changes a little, or it doesn't work?
Well, it doesn't work operationally. Shift changes at a certain time, 7 a.m. in the morning, so we need enough for the parking for the incoming shift and the outgoing shift.
So half of the parking will be empty for most of the time during the shift. Not during the shift of the shift, but during the time when people are working on the shift, correct?
I'm sorry, this is Assistant Chief Nur.
Yeah.
Yeah, in theory, yes, absolutely. But being the case, the extra parking is used throughout the year. Whether people visiting the station, because it is a public facility. But shift change can be underestimated with a shift the size that the Company 11 has. Currently they're out parking on the street, double parking. We have to have the ability to do shift change. If you take in inclement weather and upstaffing, you have to have the ability for additional cars to be parked there. Shift change is not easily done all the time, because all it takes is a oncoming shift to come on. The units are out on calls. That overlap can be for hours. Shift change happens at different points throughout the day. While our standard shift change is 0700 in the morning, so at 7 o'clock in the morning, we have people that go on leave at various times throughout the day. Cars are coming and going throughout the day and throughout the evening. So it is pretty essential, or we end up clogging up the neighboring streets, and you can see that at the current facility.
I would guess the current facility doesn't have an adequate parking to begin with, so this is going to be an improvement.
It has enough for one shift. It absolutely has enough for one shift. It does not have double. It's probably 1.5, and ultimately that just doesn't end up working.
I would assume by your answer then that this is pretty standard through all the facilities in the county.
Yes, that's our guide. That's what we try to go with.
A couple final questions on the recreational plaza for the shelter. Is there a way for people there to wander out to the back parking lot? Or is there a grade change there, like a retaining wall, so that's about even with the affordable housing part?
So what what we're looking at is building that pad up, and you have the tuck under parking underneath the affordable housing, a portion of the shelter, and the rear yard amenity. The shelter entrance, we're gonna build the grade up there, so it's gonna be at the same entry level as the affordable housing. And so yes, that's a consistent barrier, so that the people using the shelter will not be able to meander onto the parking on site. And we will be looking at physical separations, obviously, between their amenity space and the adjacent affordable housing. Right now, we're showing a potential mechanical yard to serve the different facilities as a natural barrier between those. But right, you're going to be entering that plaza, and there's really no way to exit the plaza except back out to Beacon Hill Road or into the building.
And the affordable housing outdoor rec space will probably have to have a stair that goes down to the parking or to someplace, because I think building codes don't allow you to have all of your exits through the building.
Well, Michael and I have talked about this. We probably would be allowed to egress back through the building. The doors would have to be set up to allow for that, and that's typical when you have an internal courtyard for a housing development.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
so
right.
yeah, so likely we won't want to include an exterior stair if we can avoid it.
Okay, two more. Just a comment. I know that you want to try to distinguish the three spaces, or the three uses for the housing and the shelter, but I don't see it from the outside. You got one color brick, and it's all brick for the shelter, and then you use that same color for the entrance to the affordable housing, the two bays, and that stick out a little bit for the affordable housing. And to me, it still looks like one uniform building. I might like to agree with Catherine in that this does look fairly institutional, and we know that the shelter is institutional, but the affordable housing and the supportive housing, I think you could make that a little more residential, compatible to residential. There are ways to do that. If you look at some welcoming hotel design, which is what I think this is kind of aiming towards right now. And I see in the title block here that you've got stalls in the shelter housing and the affordable housing. And I'm hoping that you not think of these people as animals and think of them as apartment units. Maybe that would be a better use for term.
That's parking stalls.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Yeah.
I didn't see, all right, it does say parking at the top. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Ray. Those are all good comments. We've got two questions. One was about the security fencing. I think you answered that when you were talking with Ray, but what is the material type? Do you know what that's going to be yet?
Well, we'll have to work with planning on the perimeter fencing to see what we'd like it to be. Maybe like an aluminum type, nice decorative fence around there. But that the screening requirements are prescriptive. Especially around that retaining wall. John Liftoff's on the call as well. He's our civil engineer. My preference would be, given that we're 12 foot high on the retaining wall side, that we could do more of a decorative fence around the perimeter and not have to do a solid barrier. But those are things that we'll have to work out with planning and and see what they'll allow us to do. But your input would be very valuable for us to have a dialogue with the planning group. Would you like to see more decorative, like an aluminum picket fence around the perimeter of the building, or would you rather it to be a more solid fence at the top of the wall and around the building? Those are, I think, good things for us to hear from the community, what their preference is.
The other question we had is, are you designing this for green roofs?
Well, we integrated. We're looking at like an intensive vegetated roof system for above the tuck under parking where you have the amenity. So that's an intensive vegetated roof system. We think we want to allow the roof at the top of the buildings to be available for photovoltaics. And as the net zero is the goal for this project, but we think it's more of an opportunity to develop an intensive vegetative roof system at the terrace deck level than it would be at top of the roof.
Okay, so for the committee members that are on, I'm curious if you all have any comments or feedback on the presentation itself, because there'll be some minor modifications to this. Are there things that would be more helpful or other things that we need to consider as we start getting ready and preparing for the community meeting? Things that you'd like to see? Ray, go ahead.
I would just reiterate that if you could make this look a little more welcoming and residential in character on the front, and also, again, try not to, I know you want to have a nice uniform building, but really I think you can do that with change of materials, change of color, or even window patterns, so that it doesn't look like one monolithic shelter dash affordable housing, so that the affordable housing people have a little bit of ownership of their housing as opposed to living in a shelter. Quick question for the county. Do you manage your own affordable housing units and your supportive housing units, or do you contract that out?
So I know we have, I'm happy to answer that, but I know we also have, Tom was on the call earlier. Tom, are you still with us?
Yeah, hi, good evening. I can answer regarding the supportive housing and shelter, and then I turn to Mark or Marwan. I believe I saw them here on the call. The supportive housing, like the shelter, will be contracted through a local nonprofit organization. Likely the same organization will be operating both. Perhaps Mark can talk to the affordable housing piece.
Sure, Mark Bonavista with Housing Community Development. The affordable housing would be managed through a third-party asset property manager, like our other properties that are currently owned in the Redevelopment Housing Authority portfolio.
Okay. Thank you, Mark and Tom. Sorry, any other questions or comments from committee members about the presentation, about the community meeting, any other things you would like to see, any other things that you think would be helpful in that presentation, any other schematics that you think would be helpful?
My only comment is, again, that I would like to see it not look so institutionalized, and to make it more inviting for families if possible, since this is where they're going to be living. I think that will be helpful, and it will also blend better in with the community.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Ray.
My phone's ringing, excuse it. I maybe think that a building or a site section through the fire station or affordable housing might offer a better description of how the parking, the roof deck, and the retaining wall work.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anything else from the committee? All right, if not, I will open it up to community members that are online. And Charlotte, you've been waiting very patiently, so go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
So this is more of a comment in general, just being a resident of the immediate area. I know that one of the challenges that we have is feeling like we don't have much of a voice in this. And I think if in presenting this to the community, if you were able to put in to scale the surrounding homes in the renderings, so that way people can see exactly where their properties lie in comparison in scale and size and perspective to the building and the facility that's being built, it will go a long way in helping everyone feel like they're being considered in this. And it may also give you greater perspective on that residential versus institutional challenge and stylizing to make it fit within the existing community.
Thank you for that. All right, do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. Initially, early on, there was discussion, slight mention of the entry plaza on the shelter entrance side, and that had to be maintained as a fire lane. And I'm wondering what in the recreation plaza is suitable recreation design that will allow for recreation while keeping the fire lane open and available.
Really an open plaza to stretch, exercise, sit on a bench, be outside, enjoy nature. It's
So
really
there's benches and things. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's really what I was getting at. Benches, possibly a table or two.
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. Thanks.
Couple of chessboards.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. All right, anybody else? Questions, comments? We will be finishing up the flyer for the meeting, and we'll get that out to the committee and ask that you help us share that and get it out. We will also be posting it on all of our outlets as well. Please encourage your neighbors to get on the county website and sign up for the newsletter updates. Claudia, when do you think you'll be able to get this online so folks can see it?
I'm hoping by mid next week because they're doing a website update now and things are taking a little bit longer than normal. So hoping by mid next week. I'll definitely send the request tomorrow, but it takes a few days for them to have it updated on the website. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, Catherine.
Would you remind me, please, when is this meeting on the 27th? I'd like to put it in the Mount Vernon Council's newsletter.
Oh, sure.
Our meeting's the day before, so.
Okay, July 27th.
Yeah.
7 to 9 p.m. Bucknell Elementary School in the cafeteria.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, is that a good time for everybody? That seemed to work at the last meeting. Any feedback from the folks that were at the last meeting as far as the setup and the boards and the Q&A and having folks at the table have discussions?
Christine, I thought the meeting where we all met was I thought that was a good format. I thought it was good that we had some good discussions at tables. Um, I was at a couple different tables, and it seemed very positive in general. I mean, I was happy with that. Happy to have the drawings there and be able to look at those. So I look forward. Well, I won't be able to make the next meeting, so but I thought that was a good format.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, Ray?
I thought overall the meeting was pretty good in terms of the format. It was great to see the drawings up close before the presentation, and people could look at them and have questions available. So after the presentation, those questions could be asked. I thought that the tables with the table discussions were a little bit forced. Maybe just having it a little more informal without having the forms to fill out would be a better idea. And there was really no way to get the forms into your hands after the meeting. Nobody came around to pick them up. There wasn't a place or instruction on where to drop them off.
Okay, thank you. I know that anything that was left, we took and gave to Claudia. So, I mean, I don't know how many, do you know how many you ended up with, Claudia?
I actually have them here. It's a big stack, but I didn't really count how many. I have them
Okay.
all, and we looked at each and every comment. So
Okay.
People at our table couldn't agree.
Yeah, and that's okay. So as far as setup, do you think it would be better maybe to start at 6, like people could come at 6:30 and then we'd start the program at 7? Would that maybe be better? Or make a difference?
I didn't hear any complaints on the past program timing.
Okay.
Christine,
Yes.
would it be useful, helpful, practical, or not, to, after having table discussions, albeit with writing down your comments, but to actually have a reconvening of the overall meeting and having people coming from the table discussions with the comments at that point out loud, and maybe someone for the county could record those things that were brought up as being more important than perhaps every comment. But I don't know, maybe after we got into our breakout, we come back together and say, hey, what'd you guys think now that you've had a chance to talk?
Okay. We can look at that. We will go on site beforehand and just kind of get an idea of how we can set up. I know that fortunately we had a great number of people that came to the meeting, and we did think about doing one person from each table afterwards, but there were so many people and so many tables, we weren't really sure how to do that part. So we'll take a look at that and see if there's a way that we can do that efficiently.
Yeah, point well taken.
Yeah, we had to weigh that, but I mean, that's a great point. Okay, anything from the design team that you guys want to ask or would like to get more feedback on before we wrap up?
This has been very helpful. Thank you.
I would just ask if there's specific, I know there's been a lot of talk about traditional architecture within your community. Can you think of any of the buildings that are of a similar scale that that we could visit to better that are precedents that are in keeping with some of the feedback that we've got, that we could look at and begin to kind of center our understanding of what you may be looking for?
Well, I can't, I've just gone brain dead, but the the hospital units that are over by, rehabilitation centers over by Inova Hospital. What on earth is that? Christine, what's the name of it? I can't remember. It's housing, if you're in
Sunrise?
the Sunrise?
Sunrise. Take a look at Sunrise facilities.
Maybe we can spend some time and find some images or find examples and send them to Christine so she can relay them to you in the next few days or so.
Yeah, that would be great.
Are you familiar with Sunrise?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
that's a prototype building. It's like a 3 to 4 story kind of
No,
Victorian.
it's just the design. It's how
Yeah.
it's done. It's not
Yes.
built on just like it.
Yeah.
It's not like the industrial jail that you guys are showing, and you're not the only ones. Everybody's building these things. Doesn't matter. That's what they're doing. And then they paint them yellow stripes or orange stripes. We don't like that.
I'll send some ideas to you, Christine, and you can relay
Okay.
them on.
That would be great. Thank you, Ray. Yes, Charlotte.
I was just going to suggest looking at the Bellhaven condominium complex that was built in like the 30s or the 40s, right at the other end of the road. I mean, that's a complex that I drive through every day to get to the Parkway, and it's beautiful. And I think it really sets the tone for the neighborhood. Most of the single family homes built around here were built in the 50s. My house was built in 1956. And so I think taking some elements from that era would really help make it more cohesive to the neighborhood.
All right, we'll take a look at that. Thank you. And if there's anything else, for anybody else that's on the call, if you have some ideas or concepts, please feel free to, send them over to me and our team. Be happy to take a look at that. Okay, I'm looking at your comments on here too, Charlotte. Thank you. Okay. Well, if there is nothing else, we will go ahead and wrap up the meeting. We will get this online and send out an email to everybody as soon as we can. And as soon as we're done with the flyer, which will be early next week, I will send that out to the group and ask that you please help us with that. And in the meantime, once you've had some time to digest that, if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, things that you would like to share, or feedback as we get ready for the next community meeting, we would appreciate your feedback. So thank you all. Happy Thursday. You got 45 minutes back of your evening. Appreciate your time, and glad that you could make it tonight. So thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Christine.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
All
Christine.
right.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
You too. All right, Claudia, I'm going to turn this off, and then it's going to process the recording, and then I will send it to you.